Response to a modern mystic video titled DK2. Kind of not fair. It doesn't say much, does it? Anyway, alright. Concept starts with this idea that we have two ways of thinking. You know, this two ways of reacting. The short, quick, you know, this is my visceral reaction. And then we have this thinking thing where we say, okay, I'm going to think about it. Like we say that. Okay? Like we don't really say it, right? It just subconsciously rolls into our consciousness that that's what we're going to do. That's the plan we decided, even though I never saw us decide. I never voted. It's just that somehow it happened. I did it. I said, I'm going to think about it. And so now we're doing this slower thing where we're consciously thinking. That's what we call it, but we're not really doing that, are we? I mean, when we're consciously thinking, we're not really consciously thinking. We're just going back to the subconscious again and saying, throw me something. You know, I'm lost. Give me, what, where am I? What am I talking about? Oh, yeah. So again, it's just, you know, we got sloppy language to describe what's going on, and that really doesn't help anything. So I don't know if this language is any better, but the conversation's interesting, and it's worth something, I think, in trying to understand what we do when we think. So anyway, what Nick talked about was, I might as well put the camera down, because I don't think I'll play his video. I don't think you really need to hear it said again. I mean, watch his video, fucker. Yeah, I'll post it below. I should put this on the Inmendum channel. Well, I'll think about it. His videos on Vimeo I could post there, but I really hate Vimeo. So, you know, they're worse than YouTube in terms of policy. Anyway, so there's these two ways of thinking. They called them 1 and 2. System 1, System 2. It doesn't sound too good, like going number 1 or number 2. I mean, it sounds, you know, piss and shit. Anyway, it doesn't really work for me. But let me just say that if we're going to say that there is this distinction between the part of us that immediately reacts and then this secondarily part that can do something else, I would argue that what it's basically doing is an error check. That when we say we're going to think about it, what we're looking for are contradictions. We're looking for cognitive dissonance. We're looking for, maybe that just doesn't quite make sense. You know, that the brain is going through the thing and saying, all right, I can tell that, all right, this is a tricky subject for you because you have a bias, because, you know, something happened to you in your past and you're using that in this subject and you're manipulating and you're bias. You know, our subconscious throws these things at us because it's analyzed our prisms, as Nick put it, these prisms of what we solidify into as we develop a philosophy. And he was sort of using it to point out the difference between the left and the right kind of philosophy, you know, a capitalist versus a communist or something like that. He didn't use that exact terminology, but that's the theme, is that you become belligerent to anything else because this is what you become. You know, a Cubs fan, a Yankee fan, a whatever fan, and everything gets blocked or filtered through that fanmanship that you acquire. Like you get certain about certain things, and anything that doesn't fit with that certainty is going to get, you know, it's going to have a hard time getting through and doing anything constructive inside of your thought process. But then when we do the really thinking thing, that's when that kind of stuff has a chance, because now we're more vulnerable. We don't have those, the prisms aren't as solid anymore, because it's almost like we're coming in the back door. We're sneaking up on our solidified perceptions, and we might have some way to manipulate and change what we're doing, to change the shape of those prisms even through that thinking process. We might modify how we even articulate something. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have used the phrase value equation. Now, I've acquired that a phrase. I say, well, this is a very good phrase, and these words go together, go well together. And yeah, I think I'm going to try to incorporate that as a way of saying morality or ethics or something else, and I'm going to say value equation. Now, does that really work? So that becomes a new prism, a new filter for me. And I would argue that it's a refinement, it's an enhancement, it's an improvement over what would have been kind of a rubbish or a mushy filter, where I would have in the past might have said ethics or the social contract or some other thing. I mean, those are still alive inside of my filter. Those are still entities, but now they're entities related to the stronger concept of value equation. Let's see where I want to. I mean, I got some notes, but they're, my biggest argument with what he was saying was he started getting onto the Buddhist thing a little bit, and I found that a little bit annoying, as if they're doing something constructive with this mind game, and in my opinion they're doing absolutely nothing useful whatsoever. They're fighting against the very nature of the process and calling that an accomplishment, when the real accomplishment would be just say, hey, you stupid bitches, quit having kids because life is stupid. That would be the simple thing to do, than to waste all this energy saying, yes, arrive on Earth and spend your whole life trying to not be what your nature has made you. Yeah, no, sorry. Cognitive dissonance, problem with that. It sounds stupid to me. Yeah, and there's nothing in our innate thinking process that's very functional or useful. It's bigoted and prejudiced and nepotistic. It's all that stuff, the whole love thing, all of those, all the really stupid things that humans do come out of that, what your program intends to do. And you really have to do the thinking thing to break down those attachments, that mechanism that tends you to go in the direction that biology sort of has designed you to go in. So you sort of have to get some kind of mechanism that allows you to break the biology, at least break the tendency, the prisms it wants you to grow, the seeds it plants inside of your consciousness, the prejudices it builds in that you need to work on to get rid of. No doubt about it. And so the another thing he sort of concluded is that there's, there's some sort of innate obstacle to transference of modified prisms. Let's call them that. I don't know what else to say. Nature or identity or perspective. Sorry, indigestion. And they're really, I don't see any problem. I mean, it's just make the good argument. The argument will fly into somebody's head, and they'll say, oh shit, I get it now. Yeah, so obvious. Okay, no problem. I mean, I don't, a conversion just takes the right argument at the right time, said the right way, blah, blah, blah. I've made this argument before. But what that guy is, or you are, Nick, or what I am, or what anybody is not that hard to make. I mean, we know how we got there, and, there certainly didn't need to be 50 years to get there. I mean, if, there's a shortcut, once you know how you got there, what the hopping stones are, you don't have to do all the trial and error stuff. I mean, theoretically, once you're there, you can sit there and just map it and say, look, you can get there straight line. Here's the straight line. There's 10 premises. You can understand these 10 premises. You got it. Blah, blah, blah. So I don't think that's a real obstacle. All right. So again, I just, I'm not, like I said, I'm not really attached to this metaphor, and it sort of relates a little bit to a conversation Laura Layla had started with intuition, or maybe conference report started with intuition. And, like there is this short brain and this long brain. And, I just don't see it that way. I'm more comfortable with the idea of separating the feeling brain from the thinking brain. And because they're all going to be controlled by a subconscious process. A subconscious process just wrote the sentence I just said. There is no conscious process. Consciousness is just a veneer. It's just a thin little veneer that everything that we are consciously aware of flies through. We get the flavor of it as it flies through the conscious plane. But we really don't make anything consciously. It's all software. It's all subconscious software running that forms your sentences and conforms your ideas and even expresses them and even makes you aware of what it is that you believe in. You don't know sometimes that I believe in something until you've actually said the words, or it's kind of just bubbles up into your consciousness that this is what I am. I am an atheist, and I am this, and I'm this old, and I'm this time and place in history, and you just become aware of this stuff because your subconscious throws this awareness thing in front of you. It makes you aware of it. It finds an association or a trail inside of your brain that wheels it and deals it and comes up with, this is what I'm going to be aware of now. That cotton is very important. That's what my brain just said, because it found an association. If I trail it back, I can think, well, okay, when I said the word history, I thought about being a little kid, and then I thought about wearing a cotton sailor suit, and so then I thought of cotton, and then when I thought of cotton, I thought of cotton gin, and that's the trail. That's the trail. And then my brain said, I will conform a sentence out of the word cotton. And that's what it said. But I didn't do it. The process is just, it's nothing conscious about the process. The process was completely unconscious. I was just getting pieces of it. I was able to view it happening, but I didn't consciously make it happen. So I think that's an important distinction, that we don't consciously do anything. It's all subconsciously done. It's all some other programming, and I'm going to argue that programming, the key word for me is, I underlined it, reflex. These are all reflexes. And the reflexes create nodes of reflex. So you have a bunch of little associations, knee-jerks, connections to a word, and then those start to associate with each other, like words like freedom and liberty and justice and America and blah blah. You'll get a bunch of words together, and they'll become a node, a reflex of patriotism or culturalism or something that it doesn't have to have a label. It's just this idea of this is what you understand things to be. Thomas Jefferson and this and this and these words all tied together, and that becomes one of these things you might call a prism. And I would just call it a blob of stuff associated with each other. And so you have a bunch of little word blobs, and they collect into bigger blobs that encompass other words that become power words. And those would be the ones I would argue would be like these little pieces of knowledge, like the word reflexes to me. It's a big word in my brain. It's one of those words that is the center or the focus or the name on a big blob of other words, because that's a controlling mechanism. That's how this whole thing is built out of. It's just a bunch of reflexes. The whole brain is a bunch of reflexes. So it's a big word for me. And so I guess that's sort of what I would argue is these prisms is just power words, power themes. And it's hard to break them down in their interactions. They're bigger. So it's going to, as your brain error checks, when you take the time to do this thing called thinking, whenever that program does run for you, like where you have a program that's running, the theme, one of those big blobs even. One of those big blobs could basically be a program that kind of initiates and says, every now and then I'm going to force you to do this because I'm going to throw this theme at you because it's big, and stuff gets in there. It floats to the surface of the interchange, the electricity. It becomes dominant. It's controlling. Well, anyway, the bottom line is that some of us actually have that happen to us, right? Where our subconscious actually says to us, we are now going to think about this. And we go into this process where we say, okay, we're thinking about it now. I do this with the physics stuff, I think about maybe I'll do a physics video, because it's sort of an important subject, and I really want to get more involved in thinking about it. But yeah, I deliberately will think. Well, I got to think about it, because the only way to figure it out is to think about it. I have to spend some time on it and tell my brain to play with it and mess with it, so I can try to figure out what exactly it is. Like, I could even say the word infinite, right? And then I could say to you, think about it. Take a whole 5 minutes and think about it. How do you qualify it? How do you put it in a bucket? How do you describe it or define it? Or, whoa, it's a fucked up concept, right? So my brain will do that, though. It'll have an agenda that runs, a program that runs, that just will say that when the opportunity is correct, when it has a chance, when other things aren't drowning it out, it'll rise to the surface and say, I'm here, it's time to do some thinking about this subject. That's another reflex. It's a slow reflex. It's a reflex that might only trigger once a day, or once an hour, or once every 2 weeks, or once a month. You have reflexes that are really slow and reflexes that are really fast. And they're just programs. Programs are just reflexes. Programs are just if this, do this. If that, do this. If this, that's just a bunch of ifs and a bunch of do this or that. This or that. And that's all our brain is doing. So let's see, do I have to say anything else? I think that covers most of it. So anyway, it's an interesting subject. It was an interesting video. And, I miss that kind of conversation. Nobody else really provokes it. And so it's sort of disappointing, that so few people are really interested in trying to find metaphors and analogies and ways of describing the function of the essence of ourselves, what we are, and how we got made, and what's going on inside of our brain when somebody says the word like black person, or whatever the thing is, and what is exactly triggered in your head, what kind of bullshit goes on in there, and how much of it is reason based, and how much of it is personal subjective crap. Tied to your personal experience and what you think is elegant, or what you think is worthy, and whether that is just as stupid as I like the Cubs and somebody else likes the Yankees and somebody else likes the Mets and somebody else likes the whatever, Purple Sox. I think that kind of analysis will just demonstrate how full of shit this thing can be. How this brain is so vulnerable to just being caught up in those reflexes that are built into its nature. The nature of this having a selfish consciousness, a self-possessed consciousness, that is a feeling machine, that has this need and all this other crap that is bending everything. That's almost that takes too much control of what gets built into our brain, what becomes our brain reflexes, what becomes those nodes or those prisms of identity, of capitalist or communist or thisist or thatist, and that we do that because of some sort of personal attachment. And that's why people are so vulnerable to accepting religion, because mommy and daddy had it, or that kind of crap. It just seems pretty obvious that people aren't being controlled by logic. They're being controlled by personal experience. And that sort of sucks. But in my opinion, the logic is there to influence, because there is this mechanism of error checking, this mechanism where if you get that thing in there, if you get the idea in there, that you get them to feel the least bit vulnerable to the accusation of bias, it will, like an acid, it will keep nagging at their brain, it will not be able to get rid of it. It will just hang around in there and keep whizzing about saying, you're full of shit, you're full of shit, you're full of shit. They'll keep hearing that voice in their head because they'll see that they're perverting reality to suit their needs and wants and desires, and that they're not being fair to the truth. Yeah. It's like there is an umpire in the structure. The structure wants to be clean of bullshit. It does have a tendency to go there. It doesn't like that dissidence created by a conflict. This conflict about cheating the truth. That something is intrinsic inside there that says, don't cheat the truth. But that is one of the principles that makes the machine work. I think. Anyway, so that's probably enough. You'd go on and on and on with this stuff, right? But it's late and I'm tired, so I'm not going to do that. So anyway, it's good to talk to Nick a little. Sort of, kind of. He talked, and then, quite a while later, I reflexively reacted. Yeah. Okay, till next time.